In this video, I'm going to show you how to write some HTML code. Before we do that, however, I want to show you what we're going to be doing. So this is 2 pages from a project, of which there are 3 total, but I'll just be showing you 2. This is the home page of the project. You'll notice that there is text in here that is actually an H2 element, so it's a headline. You'll notice that that headline is 2 different colors. You'll notice that part of the headline is italicized. And then you'll notice these 2 images, and these are called thumbnail images. And a thumbnail means that when you click on it, it will take you to a larger version of that image. So if I click on this top image, it will take me to another page, and I'm sure at this point you're struck by the absolute beauty of the subject. But I think it's best we not dwell on that. If I click on the big picture, it will take me back to the home page, and you'll see that when I click on the bottom picture, the same thing happens. So we'll be doing the home page, and then we'll be doing this page. But before we start writing any code, I really want to talk to you about organization. So obviously there's a whole video on file organization. So if you haven't watched that yet, it'd be a good idea to watch that before you do this. So let me close my browser window here. And on the desktop, you'll see that I have my 2 folders. I have the site folder and my working files. So we're going to be creating files that we're going to put in the site folder because they are files that will be uploaded to the server eventually. So if I look inside the site folder, I will see a folder called Project 1. Inside of Project 1, there's another folder called Images. And inside of that are the images that are being used in this particular project. So there's another video on how to create these web images, so you'll need to watch that before you do your project. Now, there are some missing files here. There aren't any HTML pages. Well, that's because they haven't been created yet. But when we do create those HTML pages, they will show up here in the Project 1 directory. Okay. So let's hide this, and now what I'd like to do is have you open up a program called TextEdit. So assuming you're working on a Mac, there's an application called TextEdit. If you aren't working on a Mac, if you're working on a PC, then you can use the program that's called Notepad. So I'm going to go down to my dock, which you can't see, but I'm going to open up TextEdit. And if you're using Notepad, you won't have to go through this step. What we're trying to do is work in a text editing program that is text only. So in other words, there's no rich text at all. Rich text means that it gives information about specific fonts and sizes and tabs and all that stuff. We don't want any of that information. That just confuses the browser. So we want to turn all those features off. So to do that, you go to the TextEdit menu and pull down to Preferences. And then in this window here, there's 2 tabs, and you're going to want to make simple changes in both. In the New Document tab, you want to change it to Plain Text. And then click on the Open and Save tab. And in here, you want to check Ignore Rich Text Commands in HTML files. And you would like to uncheck this box here, where it adds a TXT extension to plain text files. The reason for that is we don't want to make a text file, we want to make an HTML file. So that will allow us to do that. So once you've done that, close the Preferences window, and then close the file that you currently have open. And then you can go to the File menu, open a new file, and this is what you should see. Basically, a page only. You'll notice that those tabs are not indicated up here, and that tells you are working in plain text. So let me make my window a little bit bigger here so you can see more easily what I'm doing. But before we do anything, I think it's a really good idea to save your file immediately so that you establish the name of that file and you establish the location where you're saving it to. So I'm going to go to File, Save. And then I am going to tell it where I want to save the file to. So obviously that's inside the site folder and then inside the Project 1 folder. And the name of this file, I'm going to consider this the home page, so I'm going to call this file index. And then this is very important. Make sure you include a dot HTML. And if you don't do that, then the browser won't recognize it as a page it can work with. So by giving it an HTML extension, that means you'll be able to open this up in a browser. Okay. Before we get started writing code, I wanted to review a couple of things. On the screen in front of you is a list of the elements and the attributes we'll be using in writing the code in this video. If you are completely confused by what you're looking at, you probably should go back and watch the HTML basics video and then come back to this one. Through the magic of editing, I've tried to quicken this video a little bit. I know you love my voice, but I don't think you want to hear it for like 3 hours. So I've gone in and speeded things up a bit, so I just didn't want you to be frightened when things magically appeared on the screen. Just, keep your cool. Finally, please note that whenever I preview the code I'm writing in a browser, that I've always saved that code in TextEdit before opening it in the browser so that the browser reflects the latest changes I've made to the code. That's it, so let's get going. Okay, so let's write some code. So the first thing we need to do is make our biggest box, which is the HTML element. And so we've got our opening tag at the top and then our closing tag way down at the bottom. Coming up next, we're going to deal with the head element. So if you remember, in there is metadata, scripts, and CSS rules. But for this simple code, we're just going to include the title element, which will determine the title that is at the top of the browser window. So we'll get back to that in a minute. First, we're going to define the body element, and that closes right above the HTML closing tag. And then here is the title element. And there was some of that magic, by the way. I don't know if you noticed that editing magic. And that is one clever line of copy. I'm telling you that right now. So we're going to save this. And then we're going to go back to the desktop, and there's our index page. Just going to double click on it, and that will open it up in the browser, and you'll see the title at the top of the page, or in this case, the tab. Nothing in the body yet because we haven't put anything in the body, so we're going to do that now. So I'm going to start off with an H2 tag. So if you remember, that stands for heading 2 or headline 2. It basically just means it's the second largest heading that's available. There's that clever copy again. And now, if you remember, that second part of the copy is italicized, so I'm enclosing it in an italic element. Okay, next I'm going to create a couple of divs, which, if you remember, that's short for division. And in essence, these are just boxes that we are going to put our images within. And so now I'm ready to create those image elements. If you remember, the image element is considered an empty element and is self-closing. So there's the image tag, and then the first attribute is source. We're going to have 3 attributes all together. And the source tells the browser how to get to the image. In other words, you're giving it a file path. So it's saying, look around, find the images folder, and go inside of it, and then find this image called RON 125. It's also a very good idea to tell the browser what size your image is, so that when it constructs the page, it constructs it correctly before the pictures are even loaded. Okay, so here's a nice touch of laziness. I'm going to copy that element and then paste it into that second div, and then I can just very simply go in and change the name of the image, because everything else is the same. The file path, the size, it's just the name of the image that's different. Okay, going to save and then preview this in the browser, refresh, and bada boom. So there's our heading with our italic, a portrait of self, and then the 2 images. Okay, next, let's go ahead and make our background color. And so I'm going to apply this as an attribute to the body element. And remember, the body is everything you see in the browser window, so everything in the browser window will now be filled with this dark red color. And then I also want to define the font a little bit better. So I'm going to use the font element and give it an attribute, a color attribute. And in this case, this is going to be white, which the hexadecimal color number for that is FFF. You always got to include that number sign or hashtag. And I also have to remember to use the closing tag for the font element. So that's right above the body, closing body tag. Now I want that italic type to be red, so I'm going in and supplying an inline style here, and C00 is a bright red, and then close out that element with a closing tag. Okay, but wait, there's more. We need to space things out a little bit. So these are line break elements, also empty containers or empty elements. And I'm just copying and pasting to get multiples and get them into the page very quickly. And so this will separate the elements from each other. Refresh. Oh yeah, starting to sing now, people. Okay, but it wasn't quite perfect. We need to get things centered. So we're going to do that by putting align attributes into the H2 element. And I'm just going to copy and paste that attribute into the two div elements. And so that will center the three elements on the page. There we go. Okay. So now we're all dressed up and ready to go, but sadly we don't have anywhere to go because we only have one page at this point. So I'm going to make a copy of this page. I could start from scratch, but why should I do that? I've got most of the work done in this one page. So I'm going to do a duplicate, just give it a different name, and then I can go in and modify the code and not have to start from scratch. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is change the page title. Neon Boy.
Whatever.
And change the title or the H2 element as well. Oops, I missed an F. Wonder how long it'll take me before I notice that. Change the background color. This is that kind of turquoise color. And then the font color. And so 000 is black, and then go down here, FFF, which is white. I'm going to look at the page. Oh, just noticed the F I missed, so I'm going to go get rid of that. And now the other thing that's amiss is that I have the two little pictures instead of the one big picture. So I can delete that bottom div and then the line breaks underneath the first div. So clear that out. I need to go in and change the file it's pointing to. I forget what that's called. Oh yes, Ron Filtered 400. How could I have forgotten? So I'm going to go ahead and put in the correct file name there. And then of course the width and the height are wrong. So as you might be able to tell from the file name, it's 400. I hope you're keeping up with me. Refresh. Oh yeah. All right, so there are our two pages. Now what we have to do is create dynamic interaction between the two, i.e. links. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap my image elements that I want to be links inside of an anchor element. An anchor element is basically what you use for links, and then you have attributes in there. So the first attribute is href, which stands for hypertext reference. In essence, again, it's just giving a file path. Now, these are very simple file paths for these links because all the HTML pages are in the same directory. And so it just says look around and find this HTML page and then go there. Now, the second attribute is border. And sometimes browsers like to give a bright blue border around image links. And so this just tells the browser, don't you dare. I want no border. You got to take control here. And then I need to put in the closing tag for the anchor element. So done. And then you see when I get over that small picture, there's the little pointy hand. I click on it,
No way.
and it is now linked to the Ron filtered page. And so now I need to go in and create a link on the Ron filtered page that will go back to the index page. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Wrap that image in an anchor element, and then give it a hypertext reference of index HTML, and then a border of 0. I really should learn how to type faster. And then finally, go in and put in that closing anchor element. And give it a try. Oh yeah. I make it look easy, don't I?
Yes, dear.
Well, that's it. So if you followed along with me, or at least understood what I've done, you're good. What I've done here at the end is I'm just going to scroll through the code on each of the pages, so that if as you're working on your code, you go, Ron showed me that in the movie. How did he do it? Well, now you know you can just come here. I'm very good to you people. I don't know if you realize that.